Hey cousins, I'm Shemaya. It's like papaya, except it's not, and this is Plot Twist Please. Okay, let's get into it. I'll say it, some neurodivergent people are not your friends. There's something in the air, and it's not pollen. Okay, it actually is, because my allergies are trying to take me out, okay? But it's something a lot more insidious. Good old neurodivergent virtue. Never heard of it before? Well, my dearest, it's because it's new. It's this new fad that all the kids are talking about. And by the kids, I mean me, because they just made it up just now. You can coin that. Thank you very much. Neurodivergent virtue, the way that I have understood it, is the idea that everyone who is neurodivergent is inherently more welcoming, higher-minded, more intelligent, or otherwise more humanitarian than neurotypical people. And I will say, as someone with one singular experience and, who comes across people with lots of other kinds of singular experiences that happen to be similar, it is an idea that's running rampant on the internet, in your social circles, and probably in your brain. That's right, I can see inside your brain. It's weird in there. And thank goodness. So, how did I come up with this term, you may ask? Who do I think I am, Madame Webster? Well, to answer your question, no, because Madame Webster is the queen bee of all queen bees, and I would never dare step foot into her kingdom. Peace and respect, Marian. And the other part of that explanation is, one day I was gazing out my window while relaxing on my chaise lounge. Is that how you say it? Chaise lounge? Chaise lounge. Chaise lounge. C'est louche. Choose your own adventure. But I was pondering some more about a 50-minute video I'd watched earlier that day about aesthetics. Now, as you can see, I love an aesthetic or two. And in this 50-minute video, I watched a neurodivergent person explain how people who dress like, quote, clean girls most likely hold a very specific set of values, while people who wear vibrant colors and patterns typically hold another set of beliefs and values. And you guessed it, the argument was that neurodivergent people wear bright colors because they don't care about what other people think, primarily valuing self-expression over conformity, and that people who wear athleisure and, say, a lot of beige do so because they want to support consumerism and maintaining the status quo. Now, I was giggled and gagged because I really disagreed with this thesis. I really disagreed with this point. Do I completely disagree though? No, because, I think there's some truth to it, but do I have serious gripes with its premise? Absolutely. To be blunty blunt, I think this line of thinking upholds harmful systems, and I'm going to tell you 3 main reasons why. In this essay, I will. Oh, how silly is it that I hated writing? Well, no, I actually loved writing essays in college and in high school, and now I'm doing it for a living, so that's nice. But hold your horses and your ponies and your stallions, because before I do that, my name is Shemaya, and I'm an autistic Black woman who talks about social concepts from a Black autistic woman perspective, because it's the only perspective I have, and I think everyone deserves to be mentally healthy. I'm so glad that you're here. Feel free to hit that like button to like this video for the algorithm. The algorithm is what feeds us, so we gotta feed the algorithm. It's a vicious cycle. Here we go. Also, share this video with someone who needs it, because sharing videos really helps the most. Big wheel keep all turning. So, while grazing on my chaise lounge, I was left to wonder why this bothered me so much. Then, eureka. It hit me. It bothered me because regardless of how I align politically and socially, I am someone who is averse to making assumptions about people based on their appearance. Not to say that I'm a saint, all right? But it is something that I actively fight against every day. And that's the result of 2 things. One, it's because I've been surrounded by a lot of different kinds of people with lots of different kinds of values throughout the course of my life. And 2, my special interest, if you have been subscribed for a while, you probably wouldn't be surprised to know this. My special interest is people. I'm obsessed with learning about people within the different contexts of society, and especially when it comes to human socialization. I like learning about why people are the way they are and make a habit out of trying to dissect everyone I meet. Not physically, but mentally. Don't worry, this is not Sweeney Todd. But if you're not someone who comes from similar circumstances, or you're not invested in that, or you don't find it particularly interesting, you might look at the person in the, 6-inch heels and tight dress and think, she probably cares too much about her appearance. And in that case, I would say, that is oversimplistic, isn't it? Simple, Sally. Now, to be fair, our brains don't make it easy for us to view people as, complex beings. The human brain is wired to see patterns in order to keep us safe. And I'd argue that aesthetics are one way our brains do that. And for all of us who think, oh, I'm so highbrow and I could never fall for an aesthetic. Yes, you could. All of us can fall for aesthetics. All of us have, and all of us do every single day because our brain is making split decisions every day subconsciously. So yes, even you could fall subject to interpreting an aesthetic as fact about a person. So don't look at me with those Ivy League educated pupils. Now that leads me to the first course, or, the reason why the idea of neurodivergent virtue, as I like to call it, is flawed. I'm just thinking about food now. I haven't eaten breakfast yet, so after this I'm going to chow down. I'll chow down. First course. Time to show off my liberal arts degree. Oh, I actually did pop something there. Oh, something actually popped. All right. 1. Aesthetics being value signifiers. The idea of neurodivergent virtue or neurodivergent people being so good and saintly. A lot of its perceived validity is rooted in aesthetics. So aesthetics work in 2 parts, right? And this is just a Shamaya theory, but it's, there are links below if you want to read up on it. Written by people who are much smarter than me and who have a lot more acronyms in front of their names. Aesthetics work in 2 parts. 1, the subject buying into an aesthetic and the subject being perceived in a certain way. So it's like a give and take. You have to offer an aesthetic to be perceived, and someone has to take it and be like, yes, I received that aesthetic. I see it, and it has therefore been interpreted in my brain. But half the time, and this is my argument, aesthetics don't need the subject to say, yes, I am giving this to you. I am offering this aesthetic to the world for you to then extract from and consume. They don't have to say, yes, I am buying into this very specific aesthetic that was set before me that means something very specific in order for it to be perceived that way. Now, as a negress, aka a Black American, I know too well that what I'm wearing and how my hair is styled even can impact and often is the sole indicator to non-Black people of what I value. And even to other Black people. If I wear my hair like this, it is very much giving Black power, but to me, the way that I intend it is just an easy hairstyle that I don't have to maneuver and strain my curls with. I don't have to tie it down or, stretch my hair through a flat iron and potentially give it heat damage permanently. But to people who are not inside my brain making these decisions, they might see this and go, she's making a political statement. Right on. Or they might go, she's making a political statement. I'm scared of her. And that's just, the negresses know. It's a lot easier to wear my hair like this than it is to put it under a wig or in braids or anything else. That's just for me. For me, every negress is different, but that's just the way my negress is. I just like wearing my hair like this because it's easy. It's easy. All that to say, people can put aesthetics onto other people without their permission. Now, a quick caveat, if you will, there are some cases where what someone puts on their body is indeed indicative of what they value. If someone wore a Gucci suit, I'd personally assume that they value financial prosperity, or at least that they're invested in performing that illusion, because that's another conversation of what you value versus what you want other people to think that you value. That's another conversation. And you know what? I would probably be right about that. But I do think that making assumptions about people based on what they choose to show the world on any given day in a certain social context can cause us to be misled. Because maybe this person is a first generation college grad and splurged on a new suit because they wanted to feel important, or they just got their dream job and they wanted to look expensive. Who knows? Not you, not me. And we wouldn't unless we asked. To dig into this subject further, for an example, the male gaze, etc., is largely dependent on the observer rather than the subject, just as much as the female gaze is. I often come across the argument on the internet that if a woman is wearing a short skirt or a woman is wearing makeup, then it is probably for men. But in reality, maybe she just felt like looking like that day. Maybe she's not trying to dig into a specific aesthetic. Maybe these outfits, this hairstyle, this makeup look makes her feel good. Maybe she would be doing that whether a man saw her or not. And that's why I think it's really confusing for a lot of people when we talk about the male gaze and the female gaze, like in terms of like what you look at, because it's largely dependent on the observer rather than the subject. It's dependent on the person who is intaking this information and coming to conclusions and saying, this is the female gaze or this is the male gaze, rather than necessarily what the person is actually trying to do, who is the subject of that observation. Right? Oh, this reminds me of that speaking engagement I had a year ago, where I was talking about the observer effect. The observer effect is a term in physics where if you watch something happen, the very action of what that thing is doing changes. So a lot of the time in physics, if you look at like certain kinds of atoms or certain electrons, of course through like a device, like a telescope or something, but if you look at them, they change behavior versus what they would have done if you weren't looking at them, which is great. Like, it blew my mind. But then it also made me think about, when I was like coming up with the subject matter of what I was going to talk about for the speaking engagement, it made me think about people, and it made me think about how people change based on who is looking, when they're looking, and the lens in which they could potentially be looking. Being a Black person in America who is watched changes your behavior. Knowing you are constantly watched changes how you move through the world. So yeah, that's just a shameless plug. I do speaking engagements, and I did one like that about a year ago. So hit me up if you want more of that. That being said, aesthetics can be useful in protecting ourselves, but they are not a full explanation of who someone is or what they value. Cultural context, as I've just illustrated with my example, plays a role in how aesthetics are perceived as well. Now, I get it. If you see someone in a polo shirt who is a very specific kind of man, you might have an initial reaction inside that you can't control. And I get it. Someone in a polo shirt once bullied me too. But my fear is that a lot of autistic people in particular, since we're talking about them, use our traumas in a way that validate our own prejudices. Or, in less inflammatory terms, if that word prejudice is spooky, it allows a lot of us to use our pain as fuel for our flawed ideas and generalizations about other people. And in this case, they are generalizations about neurotypical people. That leads me to the second reason why neurotypical virtue as a concept needs to retire: the misuse of the term neurotypical. Now look, I'm getting tired of y'all using the term neurotypical. I love y'all, but I'm getting tired of y'all using the term neurotypical as a pejorative. By that, I just mean I am sick of people using the term neurotypical to describe someone, and then when going on to explain the kind of behavior that this person is displaying, just ending up describing an objectively bad person. Like, neurotypical people just hate being empathetic, or like neurotypical people just hate welcoming people in their circles, and neurotypical people just hate being open-minded, do whatever they're told, and are just drones. And it's like, all right, are they neurotypical, or do you just not like them? Because it's okay if you don't like them, but we don't have to pathologize everyone we don't like. Sometimes it's not that they're a pick-me or insert blanket term for a large unidentified demographic of human here. Sometimes we just don't like them, and that's fine. Can we please normalize not liking people? I pretty much like everyone. There are people who are not my cup of tea, but I don't know. It's okay to not like somebody, actually. It's okay. I'll admit it. There are people I don't like. It's okay to not like someone. Bring back the concept of someone not being your cup of tea, and it doesn't have to mean that they are a pick-me or that they are not a girl's girl. It is possible for you to not like someone without waging war on one particular characteristic that person possesses. And if it's not possible, I think it should be. I also think these characterizations of neurodivergent people being morally superior and whatnot, and neurotypical people being morally repugnant, is fuel for a lot of oppressive and scary kinds of ideologies. There's this thing called Aspie supremacy. It's this idea that autistic people are morally or mentally, biologically even superior to non-autistic people. And I get that comes from pain of being treated like you are nothing. But that is also dangerous, because in those conversations about autistic people being superior, biologically, whatever, we are also gatekeeping what autism can mean. And we are feeding into something that I don't like, that is part of a system that I don't like. And if you know, you know. I'm not going to talk about it. If you know, you know. And if you think about the fact that a lot of people of color are not welcomed into the conversation about neurodiversity or welcomed into the autism community, I think it's tippy toe, scary, spooky, scary, tippy toe vein. I think it's very spooky, tippy toe lane, and I think we need to get as far away from that zip code as possible, basically. In addition to these kinds of characterizations being pretty useless in practice, categorizing people as, quote, neurotypical without knowing their psychological or medical history is, it's weird at best and systemically harmful at worst. But you know what? I'm trying to be nice today. You know what? No, I'm not trying to be nice today. To be clear, the word neurotypical means something very specific. Now, you and I live on the same planet with the same war, poverty, plague, otherwise known as corona, low wages, inflation, lack of mental health resources, and people just generally being messy. Now, that being said, I think that it's extremely likely that none of us have survived the past 8 years as a neurotypical person. But even if some of us were neurotypical, who's to say that you, sans a psychology degree with 0 credentials, diploma from the University of Google, could tell whether or not someone was neurotypical? Let me remind you that neurodivergence includes lots of different mental illnesses and forms of neuroses, like OCD, schizophrenia, bipolar personality. There's so many personality disorders and things that you can't even fathom what they're like, what it's like to live with them, what it looks like to suffer with them. And it just makes me feel like people are just going a little bit beyond the pale when they assume by looking at someone that they must be neurotypical. I guess because they're wearing a colorful top. And I know it's not as simplistic as that. I know that there are a lot of other factors that people are intaking at once when they look at a person and when they are faced with an aesthetic. But it still is a little silly to me. I don't know. You're allowed to disagree. It just is silly to me. Also, I will say there is something to be said about the socialization of neurotypical culture, but everyone who buys into neurotypical culture, and I say this from experience, isn't necessarily neurotypical. So neurotypical is one thing, but neurotypical culture, if you don't know, lends itself to people doing everything they can to appear to be neurotypical, even if they aren't, in order to survive in society. Following the right social rules and wearing the right outfits in the right environment. Basically anything to prevent them from standing out. Sometimes for a person of color in the suburbs, their ability to conform, even if it's just in their attire, can determine the outcome of their life and whether or not they even have the option of obtaining access to certain things, whether they have access to certain communities. Everyone can't afford to be a free spirit. Some of them need to be able to afford healthcare without working 3 jobs. Sorry if that doesn't make you feel good, but some people need to live. And lastly, the third reason this neurodivergent virtue thing falls short is because it removes any social responsibility from neurodivergent people. So this leads me to the removal of civic and communal responsibility. Now, it's not lost on me that my ability to look across the pond, per se, is largely due to my background in theater. There are so many different kinds of theater people. It's just like Glee. Anyone can be into theater, and you just kind of get used to that concept. With that lens and that experience, here's something I observed a little bit ago. I went to a party recently for a friend of mine, and my friend has a lot of different kinds of people in their circle. Therefore, there were different kinds of people at said party. However, it didn't take long for these subsets of people to separate into their own factions. The artists were on one side of the house, and the people who gave corporate vibes were on a completely different side of the house. And, the plain white t-shirts and blonde blue eyes, they were all on a completely different side of the house. And we were on the other side. And that didn't sit right with me. It was almost cartoonish. Like I was watching a cafeteria scene in a coming-of-age 90s teen dramedy where the cool kids were always mean and always rich, whereas the uncool kids were always nice and lower to lower middle class. Or at least that's what we were supposed to believe. We, the audience, were supposed to support the uncool kids' narrative because the uncool kids are always right. The cool kids ostracize and the uncool kids don't. The uncool kids welcome everyone at their lunch table. It's, of course, you can sit with us, unless you like things that are basic, like Lululemon and The Bachelorette. Everyone's welcome, except you, of course. You gotta show me your love of anime and bold patterns first. How am I supposed to know you're not a bad person if you're not wearing gingham? Okay, of course these are over-dramatizations, but I'm trying to illustrate the irony in judging people who you don't know because you're afraid they're going to judge you. Again, as someone who was bullied in one educational environment, felt ignored in another, and experienced social fulfillment in another, I get it. It's much easier to decide that someone doesn't like you than to go through the process of finding out. It feels better to say to yourself, I can't stand the type of person who wears X, who likes Y, and who does Z for fun, than to say, my childhood wounds of experiencing social rejection and ostracization are being triggered right now, and I currently don't have the tools to help regulate those feelings. It takes less breath too. And if you've listened to my recent episode about rejection, check that one out, you understand that neurodivergent people can take it pretty hard. What I'm saying is, we tend to hate the things we want and cannot have. If we truly didn't care about them, we'd be indifferent to them. Of course, there are exceptions to this. For example, I hate watching people suffer in poverty, I hate being cut off when I'm speaking, and I hate fried okra. Sorry, Grandma. Love you, Grandma. And it's not because I want any of those things, but I'd be remiss to ignore how the lack of access to something can cause someone over time to resent that very thing. Do I think the artists I was referring to in my anecdote secretly wanted corporate jobs, and that's why they were making snarky comments about the corporate vibes in the other room? No. Do I think they, like a lot of neurodivergent people, tend to feel a deep sense of detachment from the rest of the world and desperately seek belonging? Yeah, definitely. And sometimes we fight that urge, that desire to belong, by telling ourselves we actually don't need it at all. And in other cases, like this one, we argue that those who find that belonging more easily, that there's actually something wrong with them. When all in all, it's probably just a matter of some people you click with and some people you don't. It doesn't mean either of you are bad, it's just a mismatch. And if you're brave enough, you might find out that who you think people are based on their appearances is the farthest thing from the truth. Plus, I reiterate, you experiencing pain doesn't give you the license to be cruel. I'm not telling you what to do because I have literally no way of holding you accountable. I am a talking head on a screen, and you can ostracize people if you want, but does that really make you happy? Granted, I understand that seeking safety and comfortability in society and as you develop your core interpersonal relationships is important. I definitely feel a particular kind of safety around POC and kinship that I don't experience with non-POC. But also and as well, there are POC who have made me feel completely ostracized in certain social settings. For whatever reason, I just felt like we weren't speaking the same language. Imagine if I navigated that environment with the mentality of, I'm only going to talk to people who immediately validate what I perceive to be my place in the world. I wouldn't have talked to anybody. And I wouldn't have met the incredible people who I still call my close friends to this day. I think the biggest tragedy of this assumption that neurotypical people are bad and neurodivergent people are good, or as we've discussed, people who appear to be neurodivergent are good and people who appear to be neurotypical are bad, is the fact that it shuts people off from potentially fulfilling relationships. Sometimes two neurotypical people are two peas in a pod, but sometimes they amp each other's worst qualities up. Honestly, maybe if I had a neurotypical partner, I'd remember when it's time to do my taxes, or would be able to bounce off my interpretations of social situations off of them for them to tell me that no, it's not that deep. That random person on the street doesn't hate me. They were just having a bad day or a weird time. If you let someone's outward branding, shout out to my other business, if you will, determine whether or not you're going to listen to them when they share a grievance, I'd say you're bad. This is the bad place. And neurotypical people, whatever that means, are necessary in society just as much as neurodivergent people are. So don't get it twisted. What I'm trying to say overall is people contain multitudes, and if you don't make space for the multitudes within other people, how am I supposed to believe you make space for the multitudes within yourself? All right, that's all I have time for today. I had to re-record this episode, y'all, so this was a labor of love. Don't forget to become a patron if you want to support what I'm doing for exclusive videos and the exclusive newsletter. Join the regular schmegula free newsletter because that's also great. Stay weird, be blessed. Bye-bye.